Hello and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the State of Scottish Football on a State of Mind. We are currently live across Twitter, YouTube and Facebook, so there are plenty of opportunities for you to tune in. If you can't catch the whole video as we are live, the video in its entirety will be uploaded to YouTube. And be sure to subscribe to the State of Mind YouTube channel in order to be entered into the monthly prize giveaways. I'm not alone today, as you can see. I'm joined by a very happy Sean McGill. Just how happy are you today, Sean?
Extremely happy, yeah. Coming off the back of an Ayrshire derby victory and getting to rub it in the face of our colleague Jack Donnelly, I've had a pretty good few hours since last night, and there's plenty more to talk about in the world of Scottish football. It's been great to have it back, great having fans back, and the Cinch era is off to a great start. Inject it all into my veins. I love it.
The Cinch Premiership. What a league. But well, one of our teams are currently just kicked off in a European tie. That's Rangers. The lineup is Alan McGregor, James Tavernier, Hollander, Goldson, Barisic, Davis, Lundstrom, Itten, Ryan Kent. Who am I missing from the midfield already there? That's a bad one.
It's Lundstrom, Davis, and Arfield, isn't it, in the midfield?
Arfield in the midfield, yeah, and then Itten, Wright, and Kent up front. So we'll be giving updates to that. But how tough a test do you think this will be? Malmo, of course, a lot of people may not be sure of what they're up to. They finished top of the Swedish league last season, currently top right now. Do you think this will be a tough tie for Rangers, or do you expect them to have enough to see it through?
I think the answer to both parts of that question is yes. That I think it will be a tough tie for Rangers, but I still would expect them to get through it. You know, regular watchers might be noticing I'm not in my usual location. I've parked myself downstairs so I can have an eye on the Rangers game as well. It did dawn on me that I really should have just headed to the brilliant Estate of Mind studios where it's all set up for stuff like that. But unfortunately, it dawned on me too late. So I thought, park myself down here, make sure I can have an eye on any goals that happen in this game. But yeah, I do think that Malmo will pose a test. Of course, to win the Swedish league, it's a pretty decent standard. But I think this Rangers team in the mood they were in last season and the mood they looked in on Saturday, despite being a little bit sluggish in that sort of middle period, I still thought they showed their quality against Livingston at Ibrox in that 3-0 victory. So I would expect them. They might just look for a draw tonight. That might be the move, and then get them to Ibrox and try and beat them there. So yes, I think it'll be a tough tie for Rangers, but I think they will still be progressing to the playoffs.
Good. Under Steven Gerrard, Rangers have been very impressive in Europe. We've seen them in the Europa League the past couple of seasons. They've done exceptionally well in the qualifiers and have never lost getting to the tournaments, and they've done well through the group stages as well. How impressed have you been with the way Gerrard has managed this Rangers side in Europe? Of course, his first couple of seasons in the Premiership, it didn't go to plan, but what's been consistent throughout his tenure at the club is how good the club have been in Europe.
Yeah, massively impressed. It's impossible not to be really. And the way they set up tactically, I think it's really interesting in those European games. They tend to usually, when opposition fullbacks have the balls, you would expect wingers to go and push them out there, but instead the wingers kind of tuck in and they try and cut off the inside passes while it's the central midfielders who go out and push those wide areas. Something that you don't see too often, and it served Rangers very, very well. I think that, perhaps the best example of that was against Braga last season. I think they did, or sorry, the season before last. They did that very, very well across those ties, and they pulled off some pretty big scalps at that time since Steven Gerrard came in the door as well. So the next stage, after doing so well in the Europa League, they now have won the Premiership and they've now got the opportunity to get into the Champions League. I think your fans expect them to be in the Champions League group stages this year. I think there's a really big sort of demand for them to pull that off. Will they do it? It depends on, of course, what happens in the playoff game in this game over the next week or so. But yeah, massively impressed with Steven Gerrard and Rangers. I think that when people talk about Steven Gerrard getting linked to other jobs, it's perhaps more the way he's seen his team perform in Europe than domestically. But of course, that's improved over the last year or so as well.
I think the biggest surprise with seeing the lineup as well was the fact that Cedric Itten was starting up front, preferred to other options. Do you think that is going to be more of a target man approach? You said the way Rangers can't change up. Of course, other options, Kamarif, I believe, is still banned. Morelos hasn't joined up with the squad. And I think Defoe is still carrying an injury. But I don't think many people expect Itten to get the start straight from the off here.
Yeah, it was probably a toss-up between Itten and Fashion Sakala, who has impressed since coming in the summer from Ostend and the friendly games that he's played. And then by all accounts, I've only caught the highlights and spoke to some Rangers supporting pals, but he was pretty decent again against Livingston on Saturday. So I think people maybe thought that he would start this game again, but away in Europe against a very good team, perhaps the physicality of Itten was preferred to the more sort of direct nature of Fashion Sakala. And I think Cedric Itten's a good player and perhaps will be frustrated with the lack of opportunities he's been afforded at Rangers. And that's what happens when you've got such quality players as Alfredo Morelos and Kemar Roof in front of you. So this is a big opportunity for him to try and sort of stake a claim ahead of the new season. Of course, there's a lot of talk about Morelos and whether he will go. So who will come in to replace him? Will they get a big striker in, or are Rangers content with what they have right now? And if Cedric Itten has a good performance tonight, they might sort of lean towards the latter in their thinking when and if Morelos does depart.
Yeah, they've got some absolutely incredible options up front, don't they? And this is a really big chance for Itten to stake his claim to take that spot, especially with the quality that's around him now. You previously touched on how you expect them to get to at least the group stage, and the fans expect them. But do you think that's the limit for this Rangers team at the moment, or do you think they can go beyond that? Do you think they've got aspirations to get further than that? Because, of course, if they do drop into the Europa League, I think a lot of people will expect them to go far in that competition as well.
Yeah, I mean, they've sort of progressively got further in the Europa League over the last few years. Of course, they got to the round of 16 the last 2 years and they got knocked out against good sides in Bayer Leverkusen and Slavia Prague. I mean, it's all draw dependent, isn't it? I don't like speculating too much. It winds me up no end, Struan, when people say they think this is going to be the Champions League final in the group stage.
When you're in the quarterfinals and you've got it mapped out the whole way.
Yeah, but before you have it mapped out, so say it's around the 16, and that's before you get the sort of path, and people go, I think the Champions League final is going to be Manchester City versus Bayern Munich, and you go, well, they could very, very easily get drawn against each other in the quarterfinals. So that's just a complete, there's no way of knowing that. You might think these are the two best teams in the Champions League, and maybe I'm being a bit sort of pernickety there, but it does really wind me up that. So I couldn't say on Rangers. If Rangers get handed a very good draw in the group stage, and maybe I'm saying to get out of it, but the quality of the Champions League, I mean, we're getting quite far ahead of ourselves considering they are just kicking off their third qualifying round game here tonight. But if they were to make it to the group stage, it would be draw dependent. I would suspect, though, that with the quality of the Champions League and a sort of financial disparity you see between the likes of Rangers and a lot of teams who will be expected to be in the group stage as well, I would say that third place and sort of progression to the Europa League might be their sort of ceiling in that situation.
Yeah, well, it's quite hard to call, but as we say, Rangers have been very good in Europe recently, and their arch rivals, Celtic, of course, have confirmed 2 transfers today. James McCarthy, who's arrived on a 4-year deal on a free after his contract expired with Crystal Palace, and Joe Hart has arrived on a 3-year deal from Tottenham Hotspur. So we've spoken a lot about Joe Hart on this show in the past. James McCarthy has come in as well. What are your initial thoughts on these 2 signings, just straight away off the face of it?
I don't know. is my initial thoughts, and I think that anyone who would have a really strong opinion on whether these are going to work, one way or the other, would be lying to themselves a bit, because there is a lot of uncertainty in there about both these transfers, I would say. Joe Hart, we spoke about it last week for a while on this show, but does he have the mentality to deal with the pressure of being a Celtic goalkeeper, Celtic's number one, and what is such a fraught time at that football club? I mean, they're demanding that this team and the board as well sort of step up and make up for years of failures that have led to them being so off the pace, and it's led to them failing to win 10 in a row when Rangers were at complete rock bottom and down in the third division, had no real right to get back to the same level and to surpass Celtic at the time that they have. So fans are frustrated, and Joe Hart's going to have to perform. If he makes mistakes, he'll have to face a pretty critical fan base, and a fan base that probably deserves to be critical considering the way the football club has been run over the past few years. There's also question marks over whether he fits the style of play of Ange Postecoglou, because we know that Pep Guardiola sort of discarded him in favour of Claudio Bravo because he didn't play the ball in the same way that he would have liked in that sort of tiki-taka style. So that's another one to keep an eye on. And it's also question marks on whether it's an Ange Postecoglou signing, really. I understand that when you're a club as big as Celtic, you're going to have sort of a hierarchy who also identify targets. But my impression with Postecoglou is he has to be given time, because he's more of a sort of project manager, and if that makes sense. If he's one who's going to not maybe instantly get results, but he could build something at Celtic that could be very special. Joe Hart kind of screams to me that that's not going to be the case. And I guess the same could be said of James McCarthy, who's been handed a 4-year deal despite being fairly injury prone over his career. I saw that stat from Andrew McLean, who works for Radio Clyde, saying that Callum McGregor has played more minutes last season than James McCarthy did in his last 5, which is pretty astounding, really. So, I mean, its numbers doesn't matter too much. James McCarthy will need to stay fit if he's to sort of repay the faith that he's been given by the hierarchy at Celtic. And I think he's an instant improvement, much like Hart is on his contemporaries. I think that McCarthy is an improvement. But James McCarthy's a better footballer than Sorrow. I think that's just a fact at this moment in time. But will he stay fit and be able to sort of deal with the rigorous pressure of Scottish football as well? So on the face of it, they're good signings, they're good names to have in the door, but on the length of deal that they've been given, will they be able to sort of repay the faith that's been handed to them? We'll just have to wait and see.
I think that's a really interesting point you made about how whether Joe Hart is a Postecoglou signing, because Celtic were linked with Joe Hart last summer before he went to Tottenham, which would imply they've been following him for quite a while, and possibly there's no real connection there between the manager and player. And as you also said, Postecoglou wants to play out from the back as Pep Guardiola does, and that was the reason that Guardiola dropped Joe Hart despite being at Man City for 12 years prior to his arrival. So it's a very interesting one. With James McCarthy as well, I think, he's 31 later on this year. He has had injury problems throughout his career, but he does bring that experience. And as you said, he is an upgrade on Sorrow. So you've got to think coming straight in, they're both experienced players. The leadership can be massive for the youngsters in the squad, but a 4-year deal for a 31-year-old, it's questionable. I think we'll soon find out just how good these players can be, but I mean, it's hard to say really.
The thing is, we've all learned now to not instantly go, here's an experienced Premier League player who will be able to take the step up will be able to deal with the step to the Premiership because the quality isn't as good. I mean, we learned that, Celtic fans learned that lesson pretty harshly with Shane Duffy last season. And I'm sure James McCarthy, he's kind of reminiscent of that in the sense that he's Irish, he's had a long sort of affection for Celtic, and I'm sure that he'll be desperate to perform at Parkhead, a place that I'm sure he's dreamed of playing at for a long time. Of course, he did when he was younger, and he has done in international games as well. But to turn out in the hoops, I'm sure will mean a lot to James McCarthy, as it did to Shane Duffy, and that obviously went sort of catastrophically. So I'm not trying to insinuate that James McCarthy won't be able to sort of do better than Shane Duffy. But I think that instantly going, there's a good Premier League pro, he'll walk it in the Premiership. We've learned to stay far, far away from that because it's not often correct and it often winds folk like me up. So I think stay away from it is a good thing.
Yeah, you mentioned Shane Duffy there. I also think of Joey Barton from a few years ago as well. But speaking of getting to see these players, I think a lot more Celtic fans will be able to see these signings in person. I'm going to read this to make sure I do get the information correct. Is that Scotland will move beyond level 0 restrictions on Monday the 9th. And large-scale gatherings such as football matches will still need to apply for permission for larger crowd sizes. So we are slowly but surely approaching full crowds in Scotland. But of course, we may not get them straight away. But hopefully by the end of the season, we will see packed capacities. Of course, you were at stadium last night with around 3,000 in attendance. How big a step do you think this can be to finally have full crowds again?
It's hard to answer that question because it depends on what the councils do and how they interpret these restrictions being lifted. Because technically, having a full football stadium is allowed now. That is something that councils can grant. Now, it's just going to be very interesting to see next week who the first councils are to come out and who the first council is to say at whatever point you can have a full football stadium, and that'll be pretty seismic in terms of football news. I think it's a good step. I mean, obviously, you want to see as many fans get in as possible. I would like to have seen it been more. But let's not get too political on this show. The State Politics guys do a great job. I caught a bit of their chat with Michael Stewart earlier on that I enjoyed, so check that out on A State of Mind. But yeah, I think that it's a good step. I mean, I was at Rugby Park last night. We'll talk about the game in a bit, but 3,692 fans it was, and for the first time I had fans in the same stand as me at a football ground since I've been covering games, and my desk in front of me was shaking at times during that game. Have folk sort of shouting at the referee. Of course, it was a derby game as well, so the atmosphere was heightened even more. It was so good to see, and it made me jealous because I wanted to be part of that crowd, but it also made me just so desperate to see that be the case across Scottish football and get more and more fans in, because they're the lifeblood of football clubs. And to be honest, I think folk deserve it after the sacrifices people have made over the last few years. So just to get to go to the football and cheer on your team, and make fun of the opposition, have banter with rival fans and all that sort of stuff, it's what you want to see.
I hope you were neutral last night and didn't celebrate any of the goals going in. But well, it was probably one of the biggest games of the weekend, of course. Well, Monday Night Football, we'll touch on it. The Ayrshire Derby. For the first time in 28 years, we saw an Ayrshire Derby between Ayr United and Kilmarnock in the league for the first time, in the same league for the first time. Can you just sum up how important that victory was for Kilmarnock? A 2-0 victory, that is. Without being too over the top.
Oh, I like that. Put me in my place, Struan. That's really a good thing. I'm glad you did that. I think that it was a big win because Kilmarnock are the favourites for this division, considering their budget and the fact that they just got relegated last season. The board have been very forthcoming in the fact that the playing budget hasn't changed at all compared to last season. So if you're coming in with still a Premiership budget, you're going to be expected to do well in the Championship. And a club of Kilmarnock's size are expected to win that league fairly comfortably. I don't think they will win it fairly comfortably. I'm just saying that that's probably the expectation. So to play your first game at home against objectively one of the poorer sides in the division, and that's not a dig at Ayr United, I think most people would have them in the bottom four of this Championship. It was big to get off to a good start. It's even more important when it's the derby and you don't want those sort of all those people shouting at you and saying that it's embarrassing to lose to your rivals. So I think it was a job very well done by Kilmarnock, and they're going to have to face that sort of test a lot in the Championship this season. I think I saw it as well when Killy played Greenock Morton in the group stage of the Premier Sports Cup, that teams will come in there and put a lot of men behind the ball because they know that the quality Kilmarnock have relative to that division. So I think that it was a job well done by Kilmarnock. They're now, of course, top of the league, and United are bottom of the league. And if that happened to be the scenario at the end of the season, I probably won't complain too much, Struan.
Well, you mentioned how Ayr United, they're expected to be in the bottom half of the table. Were you ever nervous during the game last night, just in case, all the expectation is on Kilmarnock? They're expected to walk the league in a sense this season. And of course, the first game of the season is a match against your biggest rivals. Were you ever nervous that Ayr United might have been able to steal it last night, or perhaps Kilmarnock may have just not taken the opportunity?
Coming into the game, I thought that Killy could be a wee bit sort of undercooked. Just the fact that this squad certainly still has some gelling to do. I was looking at the team lines last night and discounting Innes Cameron because he spent last season out on loan the second half at Alloa Athletic, the first half at Ayr United. There was only two players in that starting 11 who played for Kilmarnock last season, Brendan Houndstruck and Chris Burke. So there's still a lot of sort of getting to know each other and to get familiar with each other, easier for me to say, on a football pitch. So I think that sort of worried me a little bit. Ayr had been together for a wee bit longer, and of course, a few of them knew each other from Morton because former manager David Hopkin had stolen a few players from there. But Killy really did dominate the game. They had all the ball. I was talking to you guys sort of towards the end of the game in our group chat, and I said I'm a little bit worried about the fact that I haven't written about an Ayr United chance. Am I just getting lost in the derby hype as a Kilmarnock fan? And I was reassured that they haven't had a chance in this game. There was a penalty shout that I think was one of those sort of 50-50 ones. If you're an Ayr fan, you're going to say it's a pen. If you're a Killy fan, you're going to say it's not. It's sort of, I could see why it wasn't given. I could see if it would have been given, sort of thing. So I was happy with the way Kilmarnock played and dominated that game. But when you have been so dominant and when you're only a goal up heading into the last sort of 10-5 minutes, I did start to worry that a set piece happens here. Ayr could definitely nick an equaliser. Luckily, Kilmarnock were awarded a penalty that wasn't a penalty. The referee decided that the ball had struck Jack Baird's arm. It struck his chest. But Innes Cameron, who had lots of chances in that game, hadn't managed to score from open play, slammed home his penalty. And if you'll let me, Struan, I'd like to mention Chris Burke, because he was just absolutely amazing last night. I mean, 37 years old, 38 in December, and you would never know because he was just running at players all night. I think if he performs how he did last night, I think there's a real case that Chris Burke will be the player of the season in the Championship, because he was just a constant threat. And if Kilmarnock can get a striker who can get on the end of his chances, because there were so many times where just fantastic deliveries were whipped into the box. I know Cameron met them, couldn't direct them on target, and that might come for Cameron with a bit more sort of confidence. But Chris Burke was massive. I spoke to Tommy right after the game and asked him, how important was it for you to get Burke back into this team, because there was a little bit sort of deliberation on Burke's part. He wasn't sure if he wanted to stay in the Premiership, but because all his family are now Kilmarnock fans, his sons have grown up Kilmarnock fans since he's moved there. He was keen to stay in Ayrshire, and I'd be a lot more unsure of Kilmarnock's title credentials if Chris Burke wasn't still wearing blue and white stripes, because I think he's going to be key to their title aspirations.
Of course, Chris Burke was absolutely excellent last night. I think a lot of people picked him up as the key man last night. But I thought an interesting combination, and you touched on it as well, was the link-up that he had with Jason Naismith and the right back down the right-hand side. Of course, both of them have had a lot of experience in the Premiership. Do you think that's going to be one of Kelly's main outlets this season, is down that right-hand side, both offensively and defensively, just with the experience and ability that the two have?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Jason Naismith also had a fantastic sliding challenge to deny Adelaide when he was through on goal. And something that's concerned me a little bit about Kilmarnock's recruitment so far this season has been that I feel like it's a team who are being built to win the Championship, but perhaps they would need to sort of bring in a few more quality additions to make sure their head was above the water in the Premiership should they get promoted. But the exceptions to that are Scott Robinson, maybe Liam Polworth, who scored the opener last night and looked pretty good, and certainly Jason Naismith, because Ross County fans weren't happy that he left, and I know there was some other fans in the Premiership who thought our right back isn't as good as Jason Naismith. So I think that's a really big coup for Kilmarnock to get him in, and I think that as they form that partnership, Stephen O'Donnell and Chris Burke were once a great partnership on that right hand side. I used to love when they were attacking down the same flank as me. They stand at Rugby Park. And I got sort of a sense last night that maybe not being the same quality as Stephen O'Donnell, Jason Naismith and Burke could sort of emulate that partnership a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people were quite surprised, not disrespecting Kelly, that Jason Naismith had gone to Kilmarnock, but I think a lot of people expected him to stay within the Premiership. But one player who wasn't there last night was Scott Robinson. Do you think that return, do you think it's going to be important for Kilmarnock this season, how he can go throughout the rest of the season?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Scott Robinson operates, because his first spell at Kilmarnock, which people forget a lot, I wish I could forget, watching some of those teams back when I had a season ticket at Rugby Park, because that's when we really were struggling. He played in central midfield, as he did for Hearts, and that move to Livingston after a spell in the lower leagues. He was kind of reborn as this auxiliary centre forward who would just pester defences. And Tommy Wright last night was speaking to the press and saying that he's keen to get other strikers in, but he knows that he has Innes Cameron, Ruman Burrow, who's on loan from Middlesbrough, and he also mentioned Scott Robinson in that conversation, which perhaps implies that he will be used as a striking option, but obviously a very different player to Innes Cameron. So do you play them both together? Does Robinson feature up there himself as he did for Livingston? Does he drop in behind and maybe do a bit of both in that terms of the midfield role and the centre forward role? So I think that Scott Robinson, like I said, is a Premiership quality player. If there was one I had to highlight out of Kilmarnock's many summer recruitments as the one that excited me the most, it would have been the signing of Scott Robinson, because he was one of my favourite players to watch for that spell when Livingston were just like battering the entire Premiership, not losing a single game. He was one of my favourite players to watch. So the fact that he was back at Rugby Park excites me. When he gets fit, I'm excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, well, this result does put Kilmarnock top of the Championship, and it moves Ayr United down to the bottom, which you previously touched on, and I'm sure you're quite happy about. But where do you think Ayr United go from here? Because they weren't expected to win the derby. I think a lot of people would have agreed with that, but it must still hurt quite a lot, both mentally to the players as well, losing a derby on the opening day. You know, I don't know if they have the quality necessarily to immediately bounce back, but do you think they can come back from this?
Yeah, I think they can. I think they'll need to pose more of a goal threat, and I know that Kilmarnock are one of the better sides in the division. They're away from home and it was a derby, so maybe you don't expect them to be kicking about with sort of chances as much, but I thought that they could have posed more of a goal threat. There wasn't, like I said, Zach Kevin didn't have a single save to make throughout that game, and I didn't write about an Ayr United chance other than a penalty shout. So I think that they need to sort that out. Dale O'Connor, who has been highly touted for his exploits in Ireland, he came off the bench and looked decent. I think he looked their best sort of attacking outlet, and I'm sure some of the people watching this will be familiar with the name Jonathan Afolabi, who came off the bench as well. He just signed that day on loan from Celtic, so that's another one that Ayr fans will be hoping can come good for them. I asked David Hopkins as well what he expects from the trip to Arbroath on Saturday. So the trip of Arbroath, they're heading to Somerset. And he said that it's going to be another tough game. They're a very good team. Of course, they've got lots of championship experience now, and they've made a living in the championship out of making it difficult for teams they come up against. So it'll be a hard-fought game against two of the sides who you'd expect to be in that relegation battle in the championship. And it'll be a big statement for either of those sides if they can come out on top.
You mentioned they weren't the best going forward, and you didn't even have a chance to write about. Was there any player who stood out from Ayr United, or perhaps a way that they played that you thought may come to success later on in the season?
That's a good question. Like I said, Dale O'Connor was good off the bench. I think that Patrick Redden is a player who I get excited about. I've seen him play for Scotland under 21s. He had a tough shift up against Chris Burke. But I think that was more a case of Chris Burke just being very good last night rather than being afforded too many opportunities by the young left-sided player. And I think that he will be key. Him and James Maxwell as well on loan from Rangers. I'm surprised that they've signed two sort of quality left backs, but if they can make that work with both of them on the pitch, then that's one of the better left sides in the league, I would say. So two young players who will have Scotland aspirations, despite the fact that there's a long line of great players in that division, that sort of position. Sorry, as we know. So, yeah, I'd say Patrick Redden, and then if Dale O'Connor, I'd expect him to start on Saturday because based on that performance, if Ayr want to start getting some goals in their games, I'm sure they do. He could be the Irish Messi, as he's been called, could be the one to unlock that.
I think there's been a few Irish and Scottish messes in the past, but of course that was the most significant result of the weekend for the championship. But there were some other massive results on Saturday, and I think I know one in particular. But which result on Saturday from the rest of the championship stood out to you?
Well, if you're just going off sort of result as an outcome of the game, I would say that Morton getting a point off Dunfermline was the most sort of standout one. Of course, in scoreline, we're going to be heading to Starks Park and talking about the fact that the Rovers were 4-0 up with 22 minutes to go, whatever it was, and Aki somehow managed to get back themselves back into the game and get a draw. But just in terms of result on points gained, I'm surprised that Pars, who I think will be Kelly's biggest challengers for the championship title this season, only managed to get a point against a Morton side who I've also tipped to go down automatically.
Yeah, I think that was a very surprising result as well. But how impressed have you been with Dunfermline's signing who's come back this season, Kai Kennedy? Do you think he'll be a really important player to this side and their aspirations for getting back up? Well, getting up.
Yeah, I'm out of our sort of energy crew. I've been one of the ones who's a little bit more sceptical of Kai Kennedy, just because I think the best way you can rate things when footballers when you're talking about them yourself is when you've seen them. And I covered Wraith once last season, and I also caught him on the telly a couple of times, and that just happened to be the games where he maybe didn't even make it off the bench, and when he did, he wasn't able to affect the game too much. But I'm assured by people who've seen him more than me that his spell overall at Starks Park was sort of viewed as a very positive one, and he's obviously jumped over to Dunfermline and just getting more minutes in him. I know how highly touted he is at Rangers. They think very, very highly of him. And good to get some championship experience. So I also was impressed with the signing of Nikolai Todorov from Inverness Thistles. I think that he was one of their sort of bright sparks last season. He, of course, scored for Pars at the weekend. I think they were actually quite unlucky to only get a point. I mean, the goals they conceded, it was a penalty and a kind of weird angle cross come shot that's ended up in the back of the net. So not the best opening day result for Pars, but I think that they'll be able to sort of try and cut out those defensive mistakes and look to build on a positive season to come.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely be near the top of the table come the end of the season. But I think the result, not necessarily the most significant, but I think the one that surprised a lot of people was Hamilton were 4-0 down in the 68th minute to Wraith Rovers, and they managed to finish the game 4-4. And a lot of people who were at the game have said it's one of the best games that they've ever witnessed. How special a moment do you think that must have been for Hamilton? Just from a neutral, 4-0 down 22 minutes ago, and be able to draw 4-4.
It's unbelievable. I've never been at a game where I've seen anything like that. I'd love to hear in the comments if anyone has seen a comeback of that sort of stature. But I think that, I mean, Rovers and Accies are two teams that I expect to kind of just be in that conversation for maybe they'll nick into the playoffs, maybe they'll have a sort of just a mid-table season. So to see Wraith 4-0 up, I was surprised, and I thought that it was great for Lewis Vaughan, who has struggled with injuries and has finally managed to sort of have a run. He had a good run at the toward the end of last season, and scoring a double on the opening day was really, really good. And then for Hamilton to come back into it, I mean, they were viewed in the Premiership as those sort of never say die. They would nick points like that all the time, and they would just sort of grind results out and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, it might be a different Hamilton team this season. They've lost some of their good players and more sort of seasoned professionals, but they've still got that attitude because they dug in and they fought back. And former Wraith player Kieran McDonald, who impressed a lot in Fife last season, was instrumental to that, scoring 2 goals. Newson and Andy Ryan, of course, and then Sean Want, who's been there for a long time, with a nice flicked header to send those Accies fans who will get a hard time considering they're not the most well supported sort of club, and they're perhaps not the loudest, and they're all spaced out, and their stadium looks like whatever. That was a special moment for them, and they went wild with the players when that goal went in. It's the scenes that we love to see as fans get back into Scottish football games. And it's a memory they'll carry with them for a very, very long time, because I've never been sat at a game of football and seen Kilmarnock 4-0 down and thought we could get back into this, and I've never seen it. And I think that it's a lot of credit to Accies who did that. So the takeaway from it is, I'd suspect that neither of these sides are going to be good enough to challenge for the title, because defensively you can't go about conceding the kind of goals that they did. I mean, Dario Zanata's was fantastic, that counter-attack that was rolled out, and then he curled it into the top corner. But yeah, I think that they will need to improve defensively, both sides. I think that's pretty standard punditry considering they both conceded 4 goals. But what an advert for Scottish football, to have a side up 4-0 with 22 minutes to go, and somehow that game ended 4-4 with a 92nd minute winner from a product of Hamilton's academy. So a very, very good story for Scottish football.
Yeah, absolutely excellent. I think when you see two-legged affairs, when a team has a 4-0 lead, you don't even expect the other team to come back with a full 90-minute match, but 22 minutes is absolutely extraordinary. Another really high-scoring game that we saw last weekend in the Championship was Partick Thistle with a 3-2 victory over Queen of the South. Now, Scott Tiffany, the new signing, got on the score sheet. If nobody has seen the signing announcement video with Ian McCall on Twitter, I would advise you to check it out. It's quite a funny one. But what are your expectations for Partick Thistle? That's a really good start. Of course, they've been promoted to the Championship. How far do you think they can go this season? And did you expect them to have a victory in the first day?
Just before I answer that question, Struan, that lovely question, I'm just going to bring up this because I did ask for people's stories about comebacks. So we'll go to Graham here, who we're very glad to join us again. Never 4, but I've seen St Mirren come back from 3-0 down against Falkirk in the old First Division. It was 3-0 at half-time, then went 3-3, then 4-3 Falkirk. St Mirren equalised at the end for 4-4. That sounds an absolute belter. All more pleasing to me that happened at the expense of Falkirk Football Club. I don't know if I've even seen a 3-0, I don't think. I've been, and Celtic fans will know this, when Kilmarnock were 3-0 up at Rugby Park, and Celtic managed to get a 3-0 on that one. But no, I don't think I have seen a comeback. Kelly just must just lie down wherever they go far behind. Have you seen anything like that, Struan? Any sort of?
I can't think of any off the top of my head from Scottish football, but were Arsenal 4-0 up at Newcastle at one point, and that ended 4-4? That's the only one I can think of in the same game. That's the only one that's coming to my head straight away, but I can't think of any Scottish related. I can think of comebacks, but not 4.
Yeah, I was going to say it's rubbish because it's only 2 goals, but I remember being at Easter Road, and one of the last times it was the last season we were allowed fans in, and Kelly were so bad, and Hibs were rightly cruising in that game, and I can't even remember the first goal. I don't know who that one came from, but then a 92nd minute equaliser from Dario Del Fabro, who was on loan from Juventus, which I don't know why. Still mental that happened. The Juventus players were on loan at Kilmarnock in the Alessio days, but he side-footed it into the bottom of the net, and it's one of those mental. I've gone at a football game just because we had no right to get anything from that game, and it's always funny when you do. So to do so with what was essentially the last kick of the game was great scenes, and but not quite on the same level of Hamilton Academical.
But 2-0 is the most dangerous scoreline. Yep. Yeah. What was that again?
Stop that. Your original question was about Partick Thistle. Is Paul coming in? Like to see the boss man getting involved. And he was at the game, the Newcastle Arsenal, and left at half time when Arsenal were 4-0 up. Watched the Newcastle goal and goal flashes in the second half from the Strawberry Pub. I like that. I'll imagine leaving that game. That's why you never leave a football game early. That's my rule.
You never leave. Yep. No, I'm agreeing with that. The players deserve clapped off at least.
I saw Kelly 5-0 down at Tynecastle, and I was still hopeful that we might get something from it.
Be the last one in the stand.
Yeah, I think I was. Yeah, it was quite sad actually. I think the stewards had to tell me just to get home and give up.
Beat the traffic.
But yeah, Partick Thistle. I expect them to be in the playoffs. I think they are one of the better sides in the Championship this season. I very much like their signings. Cammy Smith is a very good one who's came back from America, had a great spell at United. I think that Zach Rudden and Brian Graham are destined to get goals in that division. No doubt about it for me. I think they'll be one of the most feared strike partnerships in the league. Scott Tiffany getting him back after his loan spell from Livingston. Scored some massive goals for them last season, and the way that they sort of came out of nowhere to end up winning League One, he was crucial to that. So the fact that they managed to get him back now permanently from Livingston was a really big deal for Ian McCall and the Jags. So very impressed with them. Perhaps it's defensively that's going to let them down, and that's maybe why I don't have them the same quite tier as Kilmarnock and then Dunfermline. But to be fair to them, the goals they conceded on Saturday against Queens, it was two very good goals. A sort of wonder strike from Willie Gibson 10 minutes in, who's another one, just like Chris Burke, who just seems to be evergreen, just doesn't stop. He's been a face of Scottish football for a very, very long time. And Rudy Payton, who I've tipped as to be one of the better signings in the Championship this season. I was very impressed with his spell at Stranraer last year, and I think that step up to Queens for him will go very well. Question mark over Queens was, will they be able to replace the goals with Connor Shields gone, Stephen Dobby, of course, retiring. So will they be able to keep up that sort of goal scoring exploits? Rudy Payton is going to be massive to that if the answer is yes. So I did expect Partick Thistle to win that game, but I was impressed to see Queens get the goals that they did. And I think that some people have Queens having a not very good season. Yes, they lost this game, but I think there's positives to take for Alan Johnston's side. And I would say that Queens will be sort of mid to lower table. Partick, I still expect them to be in the playoffs because they didn't play very well on Saturday. They got the 3 points.
And the final game to touch on from the Championship saw Inverness Cally Thistle pick up a 1-0 victory over Arbroath, Shane Sutherland scoring the only goal of that. What are your expectations for these two teams? And again, have they altered after the first opening match?
I was a bit more downbeat on Inverness than some other people heading into this season, just because I didn't feel like they'd made any sort of significant additions that you could sort of bank as being a good signing. And also because I am still recovering from watching Kirk Broadfoot in the Heart of Kilmarnock defence last season. Any defence that has him in it, I am scared for. But they kept the clean sheet, and Shane Sutherland grabbed a goal, a very well taken goal. I don't know how he managed to burst through the Arbroath defence so easily, but the finish was very cool. Chipped the keeper. So maybe Inverness will be a playoff contender. I have them sort of behind Wraith and Accies in the race for that. So perhaps I should be altering my view of that. Arbroath, on the other hand, I have them just missing, just staying above the relegation playoff zone at the expense of their United because I am a petty, petty man. And I think that it's one of those games where you'd maybe expect Arbroath to get a point, considering it's at Gayfield. They know those conditions. They know how to play them, and it's Inverness perhaps won't come into the season as one of the more fancied teams. So it might imply that it's going to be a more of a struggle for Arbroath. But first weekend of the season, I expect them to pull off some results that we won't expect throughout the season. Arbroath are the kind of team who Kelly could be on a sort of decent run of not having lost a few games, and then they go to Arbroath and they end up grabbing a 1-0 or 2-0 off them, because they're just that type of team. Dick Campbell's a very good manager. So I would say my expectations both ways are perhaps leaning towards maybe I should be rating Inverness more. Maybe I should have been a little bit harsher on Arbroath, but all in all, only a 1-0 win. So I'm going to say that my predictions are still spot on.
Spot on, yeah. Well, I think that was a great advert for the championship at the weekend. I thought there were some excellent results. Obviously, the Hamilton one is the highlight, of course, for what happened in the game, but a few surprises as well. Of course, Pars drawing 2-2. But we'll go over to the Premiership, and I think we'd agree that the most significant result from the weekend was, of course, Ross County and Dundee 0-0. But we might as well touch on Hearts beating Celtic 2-1 at Tynecastle. I asked Cameron last week on the State of Mind if he was surprised that Celtic were eliminated from the Champions League. And I'm going to ask you the same question about the opening day of the Premiership. Were you surprised that Hearts picked up a 2-1 victory? Because although going into this, Hearts were the team promoted and a lot of people expected Celtic possibly to win this game, it didn't really feel like it watching that game at all at any time that Celtic were going to go on and take 3 points.
I mean, I'm going to have to cut you off again. I love these questions, Struan, but Graham just keeps coming in with these great sort of anecdotes and stats. So we'll have to read that. That apparently Hibs are the only team the duration of the SBL to, of course, now Scottish Premiership. I get hung up on that as well, Graham. I'm sorry. To not win from a 4-goal lead when they were 6-2 up against Motherwell in that incredible 6-all draw.
Let's move on.
That's one of those ones as well. One of those ones as well. They just talk about adverts for Scottish football. That's the games you talk about, the 6-all. I think that people should be talking about that Wraith Rovers and Hamilton Accies game in the same vein, because what an advert for the game. Your original question was I surprised that Hearts beat Celtic at Tynecastle on Saturday night? The answer to that question is no, because I think that Tynecastle, regardless of the fact that there was only 5,000 odd fans in there, it's still a horrible place to go for these bigger teams. And I think that Celtic, I always thought that Celtic were going to be in for a game that night, and they're still trying to figure things out. That defence is still trying to come together. And of course, there was they tried to add experience to it with the additions of Nir Beaton and Carl Starfelt, but it didn't work out for Postecoglou in that game. And Hearts have that fighting atmosphere. And I would say, based off that performance, the team who I think I maybe got the most wrong in the Premiership this season might be Hearts, because I still didn't have them finishing in the top 6. And yes, I'm still leaning to the fact that it's heightened emotions. It's Celtic. It's the first game back at Tynecastle. It's the opening day of the season. It's under the lights. That maybe Hearts raised their game a little bit more than we'll see throughout. And it was a late winner from John Souttar. But that sort of fighting spirit and the addition of the Everton Loney Beningme, I think is how Jamie McIntosh is telling me to pronounce it, the Hearts correspondent at Energy Sport. I think that if he puts in performances like he did against Celtic on Saturday night, then wow, Hearts have got a player on their hands, definitely. So in terms of altered expectations, which is obviously the theme of this show, I would say that I've maybe undercooked Hearts heading into this season. But I wasn't too surprised that they picked up the win. Yes, Celtic were still the favourites. I had to put money on it. I still probably would have said Celtic would win, but I wasn't sat there going, that's unbelievable, Hearts have beat Celtic, because we know that there's troubles on and off the park at Parkhead at the moment.
Definitely. Well, you touched on there as well how good Beningme? How is it pronounced?
So Jamie's saying that the ing is the main sort of like stress on so Beningme. I don't know.
I thought Beningme was absolutely excellent, to be honest. But I think another player who stood out, and he was named the star man in the SPFL's Team of the Week, was Craig Gordon. Of course, a lot of people know the goalkeeping situation. We've touched on that a lot about what's going to happen there. But I think that was possibly another key element that Hearts are going to have this season. He had 11 consecutive clean sheets going into this game. He did concede to an unbelievable goal from Tony Ralston, which I don't think many people expected at all. But I think he's going to be a massive credit to them going forward this season. But another team who picked up a result that was pretty impressive, but perhaps the performance on the pitch wasn't as impressive as the result might suggest. It was Rangers winning 3-0 over Livingston. What were your thoughts on this one? Because although Rangers were the favourites in a 3-0 scoreline, it's a good victory. I don't think they played as well as many people expected, especially when it's considered that Livingston are possibly a relegation candidate. And I think a lot of people have them down at the bottom of their predicted tables.
Yeah, and like I sort of said earlier in the show that I didn't manage to catch this game at the time. I was getting set up for Boilerrig Rose versus Gretna 2008, which was a great 6-2 win for the Rose to spend my Saturday afternoon. But I think that having caught up with it after, you could see that it was one of those games where Rangers had a lot of the ball and sort of stifled. We're trying to, sorry, Livingston were trying to stifle them, but at the end of the day, Rangers' quality sort of shone through. I thought that for the first goal, Yanis Hadji was given so much time in the box by those Livingston
Yeah.
players just to sort of keep edging himself inside. It wasn't even like a one swift move inside. It was like, I'm just going to keep taking a few steps inside before sending it beyond the keeper. So I thought that was a little bit strange from a defensive perspective from the Lions. But you saw the quality. I mean, Scott Wright, I don't expect him to start every game for Rangers this season, but when you can bring a player of his directness and sort of improving technical ability, considering he's still at a young age, I think that he's a great player to have around. And then, of course, Kamar Roof, who I think impressed a lot of us last season. And he sort of eases the fears that if Alfredo Morelos does depart this summer, they do have someone there who's already proved that he can score goals for Rangers, who have just gone in for a half-time break. It's 0-0 in Sweden. When I've been managing to look up, it does seem like Rangers have the majority of the ball, but I have seen Alan McGregor pull off a save as well from distance. So 0-0 at the break in Rangers Champions League qualifier. Yeah, I think that Livingston are one of those sides who I think I have them in the playoff spot. I'm trying to remember my own predicted table strewn. You're putting me under real pressure here. But I think that Livingston
You need to
I have
remember these
11.
things.
Or do I have them 10? I have Ross County bottom. I think I've been
I'd
right
imagine
on it,
Motherwell is
actually.
the other team around there.
That is correct. I think I have them 10th. I think I'm just to get out. But we don't know much about this Livingston side because they've got so many moving parts coming in and out. And it's, I mean, Kilmarnock have had the biggest rebuild that I've seen really in the SPFL. But Livingston, for the Premiership standards, I think have made lots and lots of moves, the most moves in that division, certainly. So we'll have to see how they can sort of come together. But for me, they're definitely one of the sides who will struggle the most. And of course, that's a tough task. First day at Ibrox in front of 23,000 fans or however many it was, who were all delighted to see their undefeated champions back on the park. So a tough ask for David Martindale. Not many people would expect them to win, and they didn't. I think 3-0 would have been a lot of people's predicted score lines. So I don't think they can be too disheartened. It'll be on to the next fixture for them and hopefully picking up their first points of the season fairly soon.
Yep, definitely onward and upwards. And another team who we picked up on who were expected to be near down the bottom was Motherwell, who were it was a really good game, to be honest. They had the lead twice against Hibs. In the end, it finished 3-2. I think you'd probably just argue the quality of Hibs shone through there. Was this what you expected from Motherwell? Because, of course, as we said, they took the lead twice. Hibs had gone an entire season without conceding a headed goal, conceded 2 within the first half, but then they did manage to come back and find 2 goals. There's a risky penalty call as well at one point that possibly should have gone in. But were you impressed by Motherwell? Because a lot of people have not written them off entirely, but a lot of people have them around the bottom 3 of the table.
I mean, I was less impressed with Motherwell and more impressed with Kevin Van Veen. That man is my new favourite player in the Premiership.
That was my follow-up question.
I'm still sorry. Well, what I'll do is I'll answer that question now, and then I'll answer your original question later on. Was it just about if I was impressed with Kevin Van Veen?
Yeah, it was mostly on the Motherwell. Like, are you impressed by that result? And how good is Kevin Van Veen?
Yeah, well, first on the result I think that obviously they'll be disappointed to lose that game, but I think that Hibs, we know, are going to be one of the top 4 teams in the Premiership this season, and considering that they were leading twice, you would expect them to see that game out. But the departure of Declan Gallagher, who didn't play for a fair bit of last season, to be fair, but I think that is still a loss in their midfield area, defensive area, and they'll need to sort of come to terms with dealing with his loss. But there's firepower on that Hibs side, we all know that. But it turns out there's firepower in that Motherwell team because Kevin Van Veen is my new favourite player in the Scottish Premiership because it was so good. And I said
it was amazing.
Friday. When you go,
I was going to say it was ridiculous the way he was just gliding through the defence. It was ridiculous. I saw so much praise. Like even when Hibs were winning 3-2, I just saw my timeline was just full of Kevin Van Veen. It was unbelievable.
And I said on Friday's the State of Scottish Football with Colin Watt, when we're sort of previewing each side, I said to me, Kevin Van Veen screams as one of those who's either going to be absolutely terrible and is going to score like 2 goals all season, or is going to be unbelievable and grab like 15 to 20 for Motherwell. And based on that performance, it's going to be
latter.
the latter. I saw the guys at the terrace sort of comparing him to saying he was the Premiership's Harry Kane, which based off that one performance does actually make a lot of sense, because he wasn't just a sort of, it was a threat in front of goal. Of course, he scored.
Wasn't really a fox in the box.
Well, yeah, he proved us that he can do that, in the sense that he scored that opening goal with that great header. But also, he was dropping deep. He was a great through ball for, I think it was Woolery, who's the new winger for Motherwell. But he dropped deep and he turned and he had that ball, and he thought, how is he going to slip this through? And it was a perfectly timed pass down to him. And like you said, with sort of drifting through the defence, his stature would make you think that he's one of those players who would sort of bully defences and back into them. And he did that very well. And his hold-up play was great, and the way he chested the ball down was great. But he also had the technical ability to just glide past them as well. So he looks like a fantastic bet. I mean, watch us heap praise on him just now.
That'll be his game.
And then it'll still be the case that he will be, he only scored 2 goals all season, and that was one of them at Fir Park on Sunday. But a fantastic game of football. But my takeaway, despite Hibs winning the game, was I want to watch that guy every week, because he just seems like a top quality player, and one that I think will become a bit of a cult hero up here in Scotland if he keeps playing like that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll touch on the other side. Hibs, were you impressed with that? The fact that we saw last season a few times Hibs tended to capitulate whenever they conceded. It wasn't the best defensively, but to go down twice and come back and still win the game, even though tempers may have been flared when they were denied a penalty, which I think a lot of people would have agreed, not Stonewaller, but I think there was a lot of claims for it to be a penalty. Were you impressed with the way Hibs were able to come back, and the way Christian Doidge as well has had some troubles not being able to play recently? He came back on, and it was a classic striker's goal, just reacting first to Nisbet's shot off the post. Were you just impressed with the way Hibs reacted? Not necessarily the quality on the pitch, but just the mentality and the character that it took for them to come back for them.
Yeah, I mean, Hibs often get tarred with that brush of not being particularly resilient and perhaps letting Leeds slip themselves. I wouldn't want to remind you of anyone's in particular, Struan.
Well, a 6-2 lead against Motherwell once was a 6-all in the end.
Yeah, Graham's done that. He's already apologised to you, though, so you can't complain too much. If somebody says sorry...
No need to apologise.
Yeah, there's no need to apologise to Struan. Don't worry about that. I never do. But I think that... yeah, it's true. Hibs... didn't play great, I thought, but they scored 3 goals, and they came back into the game in a way that will certainly make Jack Ross pretty happy. I think that on the Christian Doidge point, I really like Christian Doidge, and I really want him to play more regularly, because I think he is a striker who is more that fox in the box and does sort of back in and is really instinctive. And he's a striker that I've always found watching him play against Kilmarnock that I get a bit worried about, because he just always, his movement's really good, and he always seems to dart into the right space, and he's great at sort of pulling off defenders at the last moment. So I think that to see him back in that team after, like you said, a little bit of an absence. Of course, Kevin Nisbet has kind of became the main man since last season. But I like when they can play together, because I think Nisbet's technical play, he was off it, I thought, on Sunday. I didn't think Kevin Nisbet had a great all-round game at all, but when he is on fire, the way he can bring the ball in, he can drop deep as well and feed players. Basically, Kevin Nisbet and Christian Doidge together are Kevin Van Veen, but unfortunately for Hibs, he plays in the claret and amber of the Steelmen. So they'll just have to make two, having these two players, and seeing how they can accommodate them both. But neither team were. I don't think either team were much better than the other. I think Hibs maybe had a little bit more of the ball and maybe some of the chances. And yes, should have had that penalty and where the ball struck the arm of Stephen O'Donnell. But very good opening 3 points for Hibs, and one that will sort of set them on course for being one of the better teams in the Premiership this season, I'm sure. But coming out of it, the big story on my mind certainly was Jack Ross announcing the imminent departure of Josh Doig. And I know the guys, Cameron and Jack, spoke about it on yesterday's edition of the State of Scottish Football, but I think it'd be interesting to get your view on it, Struan, considering you're a Highbay yourself. So what do you think about the move? Josh Doig looks to be heading down south for a good few million quid.
I mean, the first word that springs to mind is gutted, because of how good he was last season. Burst onto the scene, displaced Lewis Stevenson, which, as we've seen for the last decade, is an incredibly difficult job to do. but I always felt it was coming. The one reason, which might seem a bit silly, that I thought he was going to stay was the fact that his shirt number was changed from 25 to 3. And I thought you wouldn't change shirt number if you're planning on leaving. That was in my mindset that he was going to stay. But obviously the offers come in. It looks like it's going to be to Burnley, which might not be the most glamorous club, but at the same time, he's probably going to get regular minutes in the Premier League. If he went to somebody like Arsenal or Chelsea, who were likely have been in the cup games, possibly not gotten that much first team experience. But for a team like Burnley, the football's not the best on the eye, but at the same time, I think he could probably start for Burnley. I mean, the left-back situation, they don't really have one locked in. I think Eric Peters has taken it a wee bit recently, but I'm sure he could do a job in there, and Hibs are going to get some money. I'm a little bit concerned about it leaves the defence short. Hibs have only really got 3 centre-halves as it is to fill the 2 positions. Now, Lewis Stevenson is the only left-back, if Josh Doig, of course, does leave. So I think there's definitely some worry there. But with money coming in, it's potential. I think Garcia Keita is a name who's been mentioned as a potential left-back to come in as well. So it's up in the air, really. The left-back and right-back situation for Hibs have constantly changed, except of course Lewis Stevenson. The right back situation has been constantly changing over the past couple of years. It looks like the left back might have a similar situation here if Josh Doig does leave and the new person doesn't hit the ground running. But you've got to wish Josh Doig the best. He was absolutely incredible. Some people even tipped him to break into the Scotland team, and we know how many good left backs we've got there. So yeah, it's a tough one. I do expect him to leave, and I am upset from a Hibs point of view, but I'm happy for what it'll mean for his career going forward.
Yeah, I mean, can I just shock you straight in? I don't know much about Burnley Football Club at the moment, so I couldn't possibly comment on how much I expect Josh Doig to get minutes. I very much hope so. I would like to see him go to a more attractive club to play a little bit more attractive football, because I think technically Josh Doig is a very good player. But maybe Josh Doig is the start of a technical revolution at Burnley, and Sean Dyche is going to turn into some sort of total football head coach there. So we'll see about that. But I think I would expect Hibs have to bring in another left back now, because I don't think Lewis Stevenson has the fitness, or I don't think he cuts it for Hibs to be their starting left back throughout the season. I think he can do a job for game to game, but I think that you would definitely want a more sort of forward thinking option there if they're going to push for third, and perhaps even looking over at Celtic. So I think Hibs and Aberdeen might be thinking that they can try and make a run at second spot and perhaps Champions League football. So that's one to keep an eye on, certainly. My co-host from Friday's edition of the State Scottish Football coming there saying that Kevin Van Veen flopping after Sean bigs him up would be a good laugh at the end of the season to save these clips. I would stay far, far away from any of my predictions, but it's probably a good chance to clip them throughout the year. So if folk have got the time to do that, I would say go for it. He's also saying that I wonder if Burnley sign Doig and then send him back on loan for a season. I would like to see it. I think he's still so young. He's only had that one season straight, hasn't he? So I think that more minutes at Hibs when he's guaranteed time. But the way that Jack Ross was talking about it and the fact he was left out the squad on Sunday makes me think that Burnley plan on using him if he's getting Premier League football. All power to him, really.
Yeah, I think a loan back would be absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, I think he will be moving permanently. I can't see him coming back anytime soon, to be honest.
And I'll quickly pull up Graham Colwell's comment again, saying games like that, Motherwell versus Hibs, are a great advert for Scottish football. The quality might not always be top tier, but it's end to end and it's entertaining, and that's all you want. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I was engrossed in that game from start to finish. And that's where I got truly behind the Cinch era. I thought this is just a fantastic game of Cinch, and I want to keep watching it every weekend. I want to talk about it on a YouTube show every weekday at 6 o'clock, and that's exactly what we've done this afternoon. This evening, I just mucked that up right at the end of that great advert.
Spot on, absolutely spot on. What a weekend of football it was, and we'll be sure to talk about it more throughout the rest of the week. The Cinch Premiership, I love calling it that. I think that's absolutely excellent. Just a great weekend of Cinch. But that's all we've got time for tonight. I would like to add, it is tonight, it's not this afternoon. I'd like to thank Sean for joining me, and be sure to subscribe to the A State of Mind YouTube channel to be entered into the monthly prize giveaways.
Catch you later.